How's it going, everybody? Welcome to Mentors Collective. As you know, I love to interview amazing people on this show, hear their story, hear how they started their company, grew it, and became successful. The story is so powerful, and the story is what entrepreneurs can learn from and use to have their own ideas, to grow their own companies, to learn from the mistakes in others and gain inspiration from others. I'm very excited about this episode because I've got a special guest, Bruce Rogers. He's a senior Forbes contributor, and he has an entire column where he interviews founding CEOs, including some very impressive names that he'd mentioned just prior. He's been the chief brand officer at Forbes. He's been very involved in the Forbes branding insights. He's co-authored several books, including one called Profitable Brilliance, How Professional Service Firms Can Become Thought Leaders, which we'll discuss later as well. But Bruce, I wanted to introduce you. I wanted to thank you for taking some time with me and coming on this show. Your story couldn't be more relevant, and I'm very excited to talk with you today.
Jay, thanks for having me.
So, Bruce, we spoke, briefly before this call about some of the amazing people that you've interviewed and some of the patterns that have emerged. So I'd love to kind of start with how you became interested in CEOs, in doing what you do, in interviewing them and learning their stories. Where did your story start?
Well, it's interesting because I spent, as you mentioned, I spent most of my career at Forbes, and most of my career on the marketing side or on the research side, and as a chief marketer myself. So I got to meet other CXOs of like-minded people as a result of just being exposed, because Forbes is just a great way to be exposed to people around the world. It was really an amazing journey. But as part of my founding of what was called Forbes Insights, still called Forbes Insights, which was a research-based thought leadership division of Forbes that I founded. I started to interview CEOs as part of that process and part of their thought leadership journey, and I just became fascinated by that. And I had the great good fortune and honor of being one of the few people at Forbes who had both a business hat and a writer's hat, other than Steve Forbes. And so that was a great honor. And then I started writing about CEOs then, and I had the opportunity to interview some CEOs who were by chance at this point founding CEOs. And as we were talking earlier, Jay, I just found that founding CEOs were just infinitely more interesting than corporate CEOs. Very different kinds of people, different kinds of skills, amazingly accomplished, both are, but just a different story. And I found their founding story so much more interesting. So that just became my métier, if you will, at Forbes, and I've written some 500 profiles since.
500 profiles, wow. And I know you mentioned a couple of names prior to our conversation, including the CEO of Zoom, which anyone who's listening has heard of this platform, just a little software platform we used to talk to each other over video calls. And I'm sure there's been all kinds of interesting stories along the way and really some amazing people. And with over 500 profiles, I'm sure a lot of patterns have started to emerge. You started to be like, oh, wow, they have that in common, or that's really unique to this group of individuals. So let's kind of, dig into that, starting from their inspiration to starting companies and things that they have in common as human beings. Would love to hear from you.
Well, most of my profiles are in the technology arena, because I'm looking for innovation, people who want to change the world, want to be the next Steve Jobs. And what I had found, some commonalities between them, is this idea that they need to fix something. Most of them are engineers, have engineers' minds. and either something that they felt was broken that they could fix, or something that just could be done better. And why doesn't the world have it? Or they were searching for it and couldn't find it. So they built it themselves. So they have this build it themselves mentality that they had probably from a very early age in their lives, and found success and gratification from building things. The other thing is, the old saw about entrepreneurs is persistence. Sort of perspiration and persistence. You can't. There's nothing that can be accomplished without it. But particularly if you are creating something from nothing, so no one's going to do it for you, so you have to do it. And then one of the third things they almost invariably say is luck, being in the right place at the right time, being in the right place in time in terms of history, the history and development of technology, being in the right place for allowing the cloud to develop, so then they could become more creative and not having to spend all their money in VC capital on servers. That's been a huge source of innovation for startups. And the other thing I found personally for them is almost invariably humble. They understand that this could all go away pretty fast. And there's always someone else having an idea like them, and so their humbleness is both an appreciation for the people around them, and their appreciation for the fact that they're never going to have to stop iterating.
Yeah. So a couple of really key things there. I guess it kind of starts out with inspiration. Obviously, these are very intellectual, intelligent people who, like you said, usually have some kind of engineering or development background and are kind of need to scratch their own itch. They see something in the world that can be better, and they go out and make it themselves. That takes a certain level of creativity, I assume. But beyond that, I mean, the persistence, I feel like that's a really key area that not everybody has that same level of persistence, especially through the hard times. Where do you think that comes from in these hyper-successful entrepreneurs? Where do you think they get that drive from?
That's interesting, because I almost invariably ask that. The answers are always obviously a little different, but often it comes from a family experience. And amazingly enough, and often enough, they are the products of single mothers.
Interesting.
And they saw the hard work that their mothers, to put food on the table. I'm not saying they were all, poor. Some aren't, definitely, for sure. But that sort of drive, that is, stick-to-itiveness, and no one else will do it if you don't do it. I think it almost invariably comes from your family environment.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with you. Granted, you've talked to a lot more people than I have, but I've noticed something similar. Usually people who have more fortunate upbringings just don't have the same level of motivation. They've never had to develop it out of necessity. The single mother thing and watching kind of the family struggles growing up, I can completely see and understand how that would be the case. What else I thought you said that was a little bit interesting was they all have sort of attribute it to luck. What you'd think with all of these hyper-successful achievers, they'd be like, I'm awesome, I built the best product, I'm the best person ever. But the luck kind of comes with the sense of humility that you mentioned, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly.
Right place, right time. It wasn't because I'm the best. It wasn't because the product was the best. It was situational. And I thought that was really interesting as well.
Yeah, because there's usually a moment in their life that turns their life in a way that puts them on the direction that they spent the rest of their lives on. And it could be, a family-run business that they got experience at, or a family member that became a mentor around starting a business. But or we were talking about one of my earliest profiles. Luck sometimes comes from the strangest places. A gentleman, Wences Cesars, who is an Argentinian growing up in Patagonia on a sheep farm, and while he had this builder's mentality that they all had, his luck came because he got this opportunity to get a scholarship to go to Wharton, to go to Penn and then Wharton, and that kind of changed the trajectory of his life. So he would have been perhaps he would have done something else. He probably have built something else, but he wouldn't have been exposed to the things that he was. So that was luck. And then sometimes luck is the right time. Luck is building technology in a time where it's never been easier to do that with the advent of the cloud and the simplification of software. And those developments have led to innovations that these single-minded, build it, fix it people have been able to thrive in.
Yeah, no, I love that. And kind of going a little bit deeper into the why, the how, what is the kind of the purpose? What is the final goal? Are they all in it to change the world? Do some of them just want the freedom, the notability? Kind of where are their heads at as they're building these things?
It's sort of all over the place because they're all human beings, just like anyone else, and so they have their own reasons. But there are some commonalities, there are patterns that emerge, and I think the ones that are ultimately more successful have a greater purpose. And it doesn't always start with a greater purpose, but it develops into a greater purpose. And that they want to improve people's lives, or improve, even if it's improve the lives of developers, improves the lives of consumers, improves someone's life, make the world a better place. I know it sounds kind of soft, but I don't think they would be able to have that sort of maniacal focus on what they're doing if they didn't not only could tell themselves that, but could bring people along. Because you have to bring people along, and you have to be, in addition to being very good at what you do, you have to be a pretty good storyteller. You're unveiling a notion of the future that doesn't exist, and you have to paint a picture for that. And sort of allow everyone to lift their chins up to the sky and say and think to themselves, "Wow, I want to be part of this. This could be, we're doing something important."
Yeah, and it's funny, beyond all of those other qualities that we just mentioned, they all kind of have to have some sort of leadership qualities in order to, because they can't do it alone. They've got to inspire the team to buy into their idea, to their vision. Have they all been pretty consistent leaders in their leadership qualities, been relatively the same?
That's probably more points of differentiation than anything else. Because often leading a business is very different from starting a business. And some don't make it along the way. Brilliant entrepreneurs come up with an idea. They're wide-eyed engineers, but can't expand around a few people that are helping them develop that vision. And the ones that I typically talk to, and I have to admit, I'm focusing on sort of mid-stage startups because they've already shown that they can succeed in growing the company, and that requires leadership. So it's a little bit of a biased sample, but nonetheless, I think one of the things that they say, because often there's a bunch of engineers who get together and form a company, and someone has to emerge as the CEO, and often that CEO is not just necessarily someone who's the guy who's good at finance, but he's the person who's adept at storytelling. He's the one who best tells the story to investors, best tells the story to customers, and sort of by dint of that skill is steps forward as the CEO. That's often the case I've found.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Now, kind of going into their personal lives, because I know, being one of these hyper successful CEOs, these tech titans, such as the founder of Zoom, kind of have to make a lot of sacrifices along the way. You look at Elon Musk. I mean, you sacrifice time, you sacrifice fun, you sacrifice a good portion of your life dedicated to this cause. Have you noticed that do they have regrets? Have they been able to find balance, or is it a laser focus from birth to tech titan?
It depends. There's someone like Richard Branson who marries and merges his love of life to his business brand. That was the case for Malcolm Forbes, who created Forbes as a icon in media. They're rare, though. Those folks are rare. Most people that I talk to are pretty focused on what they want to accomplish, and it's very possible that their personal lives, suffer as a result to some extent. But they're not. That's not what drives them. They're not in it to get typically. There's always exceptions. They're not in it for the after their IPO to get a Ferrari. That is it happens, and it's sort of a glamorized Hollywood version of entrepreneurs. But I find that to be rarely the case, and it's not too much later in life where they decide to kind of monetize their work in that way. But most have to, I'm sure, have to be told to stop, to not spend as much time there. Because work is who they are.
Yeah.
Not just work. Work is different for them. Work for most people is something you do, to make money and spend your time. For them, it's to solve things, it's to build things, and that's a whole different notion of work.
Yeah, it's purpose. It is definitely different.
Exactly.
So interesting. What is the most interesting interview that you think you've done? One that the audience will find entertaining. Of all the 500, what is the one that you remember the most?
Well, actually, I did interview Richard Branson, who
that must have been incredible.
Is an amazing person. So I did get it. I have had a chance to kind of meet this sort of, ultimate success entrepreneurs, the Charles Schwab, Bill Gates, Richard Branson. But Richard Branson stands out because, as I said, he's someone who was able to merge his love of life and his joy in life that became a personal brand that then became businesses and multiple businesses and became a billionaire as a result. But in the interview, which was in person, he walked in by himself, no entourage, no, typically corporate CEOs will have, their handlers, their PR people, and their marketing people, their security people, and they're looking at their watch while they're talking to them. Whereas he was like, waltz is in, I'm yours. What do you want to do? What do you want to talk? It was just everything you would have thought that his brand stands for. So that was interesting. And I'll contrast that with actually one of my more recent interviews. There's a gentleman named Sanish Montar, who's founded a company called Legion Technologies, which is in workforce management. And he took a bit of a different path. He was the chief product officer at SAP, one of the largest software companies in the world. Had this big corporate job, spent most of his life working his way up the corporate ladder, and sort of decided one day, maybe there's more to life. He got in his car, put his two dogs in his car, drove around the country, just wanted to see what he described as real business, the real world, outside of Silicon Valley. And that became the genesis of his business. He had thoughts about it before, but it kind of was crystallized in his journey around America. And this idea that the challenges that hourly workforces in the gig economy faces in businesses, managing them and creating a meaningful work life in that world, and he wanted to try and change that. It became a mission to turn hourly work into meaningful work. And he hopes his software will do it. Now, it's still somewhat early days, but he has generated some success and is growing pretty fast. So those are sort of I love those stories when someone has that aha moment. My life is now going to change. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm going to throw myself into it. And that was one of those examples.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's definitely exciting to hear when people realize there's more, decide to take action and go do something drastic. That's pretty drastic.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Very jealous about the Richard Branson interview as well. He's one of my idols. I'd say if there was one entrepreneur that I truly looked up to, is because of his fusion of purpose and love of life. And
right.
He just seems to be like the perfect role model for that. And also seems like a good guy. And from whatever I've talked to two people who have met him, you're the second. Both of them have great things to say. And at that level of success and notability, he's able to stay humble and stay happy. And I admire that so much about him.
It's interesting because you would think he would be one of these people who walks in the room with his hair on fire because he's Mr. Fun and Excitement, and even danger. But it's not the case. Very quiet. It's sort of very unassuming from that perspective. We didn't go for drinks later. Maybe he's a different guy. But it was impressive in a way that I had never experienced that before. Most of them want to kind of show you who they are.
That's funny. What do you mean by that? They'll take you for drinks, open up.
Well, want to impress you. Even though they're incredibly successful.
Yeah, I guess everyone's got an image of themselves, a caricature that they try and fit into, especially during an interview, I'm sure.
Exactly.
That's funny. So kind of changing gears here, I did want to speak a little bit about your book. So the title intrigued me, and that's something that I truly believe in too. And the title, I'll repeat it for the listeners, is Profitable Brilliance: How Professional Services Firms Become Thought Leaders. And this is something that I think is stressed a lot more now in the marketing space, especially for service agencies, is people don't want to just do business with a faceless firm or agency anymore. They're oftentimes buying into the specific thoughts of the spokesperson or the leader of that organization. And it seems like you're a subject matter expert in that. So talk to me a little bit about your purpose for writing the book and kind of the elevator pitch for what's described inside.
Yeah, sure. So what I found was most service firms that you described, accountants, lawyers, even ad agencies whose business is communicating, are terrible at telling their own stories, and terrible at marketing themselves. And this was particularly true for accountants and lawyers. And so I thought the way that they help them market themselves and differentiate themselves was to create thought leadership. That is their perspective, as you say. They have to have a perspective that differentiates themselves in the marketplace, codify that into a story that then gets repeated in their speeches at the local Rotary Club, in their collateral, that says this is a person worth listening to. And so it's a bit of a how-to book along with just stories of others who've done it, hopefully in some entertaining fashion along the way. So it's not just a bullet points of what to do, but kind of how others have done it. And so that was written several years ago, and that concept of thought leadership for those firms was relatively new, and so it really hit a chord. And I think you'll find more interest in it and more devotion to thought leadership in those sectors than there were a couple of years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you had to give some of the bullet points from the book for how to actually implement this, because I believe in the same thing. We work with a lot of CPAs, a lot of lawyers, doctors even. I think this is important for who own their own clinics and are just kind of dependent on traffic from the normal sources. They end up doing much better and having more successful practices and dealing with more enjoyable clientele if they're able to implement these things and get people wanting to work with them. So what are some of those steps that they can take to move in that direction?
Yeah, the first step is codifying that perspective that is different. Everyone assumes you're a good accountant. Everyone assumes you're a good doctor. Everyone assumes you're a good lawyer. But are you the best? Are you better? And so no one is going to say that about you because you say it about yourself. So start to codify that perspective. That is, you have a perspective on tax advantage investments as an accountant. What is that? What is that perspective? You're not giving away the specifics of any specific thing that you recommend to anyone, but in a general storytelling way, how you see the world. And most of the time, most of those folks will need some help along the way to be able to put that perspective into a story. And again, it's all about storytelling. And so they may need to hire some outside service or a writer adept at storytelling to kind of put that into a coherent, crystallized, and both informative and entertaining fashion. So that's the first thing. Then to collateralize. That is, start to commit that to a paper, a book, a speech, and then be relentless in putting yourself open to those opportunities to share. Speak to the local Rotary Club. Speak to your alma mater. Career days. Start getting good at telling that story in person. So then you have the in-person storytelling, the collateralized version of that, and be consistent and be persistent. That word again, but it applies here in applying that vision and that story in whatever situation that applies to. I mean, there's so many opportunities to communicate, social media and
there are.
Creating your own
That's funny. It's one of the exactly what we're doing right now.
Exactly. And not everybody's going to be comfortable with that. So either they may need to assign someone who is comfortable with it, or get trained to do it. And sometimes training is just training by doing.
Yeah, I agree with you. And this is where if you're looking for some help in the communications and the platforms to deliver that communication, that's something that we do over in my company. So that's it's funny when I read the title. So Bruce, thank you so far for everything that you've shared. I do want to hear some final thoughts and tips after speaking with all of the successful CEOs that you've spoken with. Tips for future CEOs, so the next generation. If there's anything that they can implement in their lives to put them in a position for success based on everyone that you've talked to, what would those tips be?
Yeah, sure, Jay. I would say one, be a good listener. Even if you are an A-type personality, and you have very definitive ideas of how the world should work and how to fix things and create the things that you see in the world that don't exist. You still have to listen to people, because people are your customers. People are your cohorts, your colleagues, your developers that are working on implementing your idea. So listening. Be a good listener. And I think perhaps some of the downfall of those who don't quite make it out of that startup to a successful trajectory, and that probably would be one of the most important attributes that maybe they fall down on.
Yeah, be a good listener. I love that. So Bruce, this is Mentors Collective. I always ask the same two questions at the end of most episodes here. They are, one, who would you consider your mentor to be, both personally or virtually? Somebody who's a guru that you look up to, you read their books, consume their content. Who is that for you?
Yeah, there are lots of people. Amazingly enough, I had the good fortune very early in my life to be at Forbes and to have worked with Malcolm Forbes, who was just a brilliant person at all the things we've talked about, sort of innately brilliant at it, in much in the mode of Branson. And so I got to see that in action very early in my life, and that was certainly had a big impact on me.
I can't even imagine how incredible that must have been. Malcolm Forbes, obviously, he created a dynasty that everybody has heard of and consumes every day. So that's certainly a great example there. How about one book that you've read that has changed your life that you recommend that everybody pick up?
It's interesting because the books that I read, I tend not to read business books or books about other entrepreneurs.
That's fine.
For whatever reason, I am interested in books on physics and cosmology. And the only reason a book by Brian Greene, The Theory of Everything, is something that I found I go back to once in a while. But it just I only understand half of it. But it puts me in a mindset that the world is a much bigger place than we see, and helps put my world in some sort of perspective, a sense of wonder.
Yeah, I love that. I don't read those types of books, but I do consume a lot of YouTube videos, theories about the universe. And it makes you feel, I don't want to say insignificant, but humble in a lot of ways. So that's very interesting. And I recommend that a lot of people do that too. Expand your knowledge and start asking some bigger questions and looking into some of the bigger questions that we don't currently have answers to. And it makes you feel a little bit more human. It's an interesting thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, Bruce, this was a ton of fun. It was an absolutely amazing conversation. Obviously, you have a Forbes column that I'm going to link to and probably start reading a bunch of your profiles. But for those of the people listening, where's the best place to connect with you, to follow you, to see your work?
So you can go to Forbes, to my column, Forbes Insights. It's Forbes.com /sites /Bruce Rogers. And you can connect to me there. You can connect to me through LinkedIn. I share all my stories on LinkedIn and all my social media outlets. And happy to hear from folks.
Sounds good. Bruce, this was a ton of fun. I'm really honored to have met you, and I want to thank you again for taking the time to speak with me and deliver the value for the audience that you did today. And I hope to stay connected with you as time goes by and continue our relationship. So again, thank you for taking the time. We'll talk to you soon.
Jay, likewise. Thank you. Take care.